الآيات لقوم يتفكرون, and thus to explain our signs and evidences for those who reflect. Brothers, sisters and friends, I hope what I'm going to say now is not taking out of my time, because I follow an ethical tradition, and that ethical tradition is when you intellectually engage with others, you can't lie. So I'm very close to walking out, but I'm not, because I want to respect all of you. If I want to ask Mr. Perkins a question. You said knowledge is haram in Islam. I want you to give me the proof. You said knowledge is haram, forbidden in Islam. I want textual proof from the Quran or the Sunnah, the prophetic traditions. If you don't do that, either admit you're lying or you're misinformed. You're a doctor, you're an academic, to come here, all types of knowledge. To come here and to actually spew lies is unethical, it's demeaning, it's disrespectful, and it just shows bad on the atheist tradition.
Okay.
So please give me evidence why knowledge is haram in the Islamic tradition.
What I said was...
You said knowledge was haram?
Yes.
And if you're wrong, I want an apology. It is very friendly. I'm just trying to teach people manners.
What I was referring to...
Yes, sir, please.
What I was referring to...
Yes, sir.
Were the teachings of Al-Ghazali.
And he said knowledge was haram.
What he said was that reason and...
I read a book by Al-Ghazali.
Okay, what...
Al-Ghazali, who in essence introduced what we now recognize as Muslim thought or popular Muslim philosophy, overstated the literal interpretation of Islamic scriptures over reason, and stated that reason alone is insufficient to investigate truth, if not filter it through Islamic scriptures. A method of thought that Hamza Tzortzis today aspires and follows completely. As we witness with his misuse of the philosophy of science to understate the truth-bearing ability of science, in contrast to Islamic scriptures, who Hamza Tzortzis considers absolute truth.
Sometimes we belittle the Quran accidentally. When we see an ayah in the Quran that talks about, for example, the camels and how we created it, or when Allah says that you were an alaqa, you were a nutfatin min maniyyin, or when Allah talks about natural phenomena, what do we do straight away? We say, scientific miracle. This is rubbish. Sorry. This is wrong.
So, according to Hamza Tzortzis, the Quran is above the investigative, analytical capacity of science.
Because what we've done, we've made science into a god now. We've deified science, and we've limited the Quran. Science changes. That even if you think science gives you absolute truth, it can always change. They are always defeasible. I'll bring out my notes, my postgrad notes for you to see now. Because you have some online idiots, no offense, don't want to swear, but you have online idiots from, the skeptic tradition and the aggressive atheists. They think, science is like wahi, it's like revelation. It's not. It changes.
With his statement, science is not like revelations, in other words, he implied revelations, absolute truths, he admits he puts the Quran over science and over reason, and therefore admits blind faith. As a modern-day Al-Ghazali, Hamza Tzortzis thinks reason and evidence inferior to revelations. And of course, his interlocutor in this debate was right, after all.
Okay, what I said that he said was, reason and rationality are useless and should be condemned. Okay, now if I have misinterpreted the word haram, perhaps I am incorrect in that. But what I meant by that was just what I said here, that reason and rationality is condemned in Islam. That's what I meant.
Okay, that's a lie.
Well, that is what...
Have you read the works of Al-Ghazali? Name me one book he wrote. Just one book.
The Incoherence of the Philosophers is the title of a landmark 7th century work by the Persian theologian Al-Ghazali and a student of the Arsarid school of Islamic theology, criticizing the Abyssinian school of early Islamic philosophy. Muslim philosophers such as Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi are denounced in this book as they follow Greek philosophy, even when it contradicts Islam. The text was dramatically successful and marked a milestone in the ascendance of the Arsarid school within Islamic philosophy and theological discourse. In other words, Al-Ghazali, exactly as the professor in the debate with Hamza Tzortzis implied, created a dominant school of thought antithetical with ancient Greek free thinking and philosophy that understates reason and evidence and overstates revelations. And yet, isn't that exactly the mindset we witness today in dominant Islamic thinking? How Muslims investigate truth? They use reason? No, they investigate hadiths. So, your interlocutor, Hamza Tzortzis, was right. Okay, when he said what he said. You, as always, deceive people, not because you are a liar, simply because you are a deluded zealot, incompetent of facing reality.
Concerning my affiliations with the Islamic group Hizbut Tahrir, also known as HT, I would like to say that I was once a member of HT, but I am no longer a member of HT.
Guys, look now the irony. When this debate happened many years ago, Hamza Tzortzis was invited by Hizbut Tahrir Australia. These are some members. I recognize them. Let me show you. This guy. This guy is Hizbut Tahrir Australia. You might recognize this guy from Hizbut Tahrir Australia. Why is this important in this context? Because Hizbut Tahrir is notoriously following letter by letter a literal interpretation of Islamic scriptures and applies zero critical thinking to things. They want to take all reason out of social life. Okay, they are the most blind cultists imaginable. Even ISIS, they accuse ISIS of applying innovations. Okay, we are talking literally the most blind cultists in Islam, Hizbut Tahrir. They are the most literalist in all Islam. So, Hamza Tzortzis was a member of this group, but supposedly he cannot fathom the concept of blind faith. Yeah, right, Hamza Tzortzis. Okay, this exposure was overdue because when I saw this debate 7 years ago, I didn't have a channel to expose this fool, and he got away. But now the roosters came, what's the expression? The chickens came home to roost. Here, the soulmate of Hamza Tzortzis, Ahmad Subboor, writes on the board inconvenient questions against Islamic practices and ideas. And then he claims that the reason is irrelevant when addressing these questions. The only thing that matters is Muhammad said so.
The answers that he was actually giving, were they satisfying me? Okay. Were the answers leading to other questions or were they resolving questions? Okay. If you try and use your logic and your reasoning to try and give him an answer, then he can try and change the question and ask you in a different way. Fundamentally, this is what I want you to understand. In this conversation, there are two people who are not actually talking on the same level. There is a Muslim who is looking at the world through lenses, green lenses, and he's looking at the world as green. And there is a non-Muslim who is looking at the world through red lenses. So what's happening in the conversation is the Muslim is saying, this is green, this is green, this is green. The non-Muslim is saying, this is red, this is red, this is red. Why is that? The reason is, this is the case is because the Muslim is looking at the world through the lenses of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. He believes that this man called Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the final messenger of God, therefore whatever he says is true. Now, what I want to do is this. These are aspects of Islam that we all believe in and accept. What if I come along and I tell you something? I tell you hypothetically, before you do takfir on me, hypothetically, there is a sahih narration of the Prophet ﷺ that you have to wear a yellow hat on Sundays. Hypothetically. Raise your hand if you're going to wear a yellow hat on Sundays.
Like, what's wrong with Shabir Ali? I had no idea. But have you looked into his credentials? Have you looked into his background?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't memorize them, but not too long ago I checked them out, and he's Western educated. So from the looks of it, what he has learned regarding Islam is going to be from the West. It's going to have that Oriental perspective, which is essentially poison. So
what Western mindset implies to Islam? What Orientalism implies to Islam? Reason, skepticism. So this guy just said that reason is poison. Continue.
yes, yeah, I wanted to share a benefit that we can all come away with and remember. There is this authentic quote of Ali, the great companion, may Allah be pleased with him. If this religion were based on opinion, then the bottom of the leather socks would be wiped instead of the top. But rather, I saw the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wipe over the top of his leather socks. So there's two main points I just want us all to derive from this and to remember, especially as we react to this upcoming video. And number one, Islam is about following revelation. Islam is about submitting to Allah. Allah knows everything. He sent the Prophet ﷺ with guidance. So we submit to that, we follow that. If our intellect, our conjecture, our perspective conflicts with that, we know the deficiency is with our own perspective, our own conjecture. So that's a very simple, but it's a foundational concept of what Islam actually is.
No. But wait a moment. Wait just a moment. According to the Hizbut Tahrir member Hamza Tzortzis, Islam is all about reason, evidence.
I follow an ethical tradition, and that ethical tradition is when you intellectually engage with others, you can't lie. So I'm very close to walking out, but I'm not because I want to respect all of you. I want to ask Mr. Perkins a question. You said knowledge is haram in Islam. I want you to give me the proof.
Quran verse 33-36. It's not fitting for a believer, man or a woman, when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, to have any option about their decision. If anyone disobeys Allah and His Messenger, he is indeed on a clearly wrong path. Your real tradition is about reason and evidence, the ancient Greek, the one you denounce. Now let's see your current tradition, the Islamic tradition.
While the constellations are Greek and Roman, the names are Arabic, all right? And the list just goes on and on and on and on. And so where does this come from? How does this happen? How do you get stars named with Arabic names? How does this happen? And it happens because, of course, hang on, just catching up with myself here. Okay? It happens because there was this particularly fertile period that Professor Weinberg duly discussed. And around that period, that 300-year period, the intellectual center of the world was Baghdad. Baghdad. It was completely open to all visitors, all travelers, Jews, Christians, doubters, which today we might call atheists. They were all there exchanging ideas. All of them. All of them. And it was that period where you had the advances in like engineering and biology and medicine and mathematics. All right? Our numerals are called what? Arabic numerals. They ever stop and think about that? You know, who as in America, do we take pause at this? Why are they called Arabic numerals? Okay, they fully exploit the discovery of the zero, create a whole field called algebra, itself an Arabic word. Algorithm is an Arabic word. All this is going on, and it's all traceable, not to some long 1,000-year tradition in Islam. It's traceable to this 300-year period. This 300-year period. And then, so they had naming rights. The most expensive, beautifully carved astrolabes come out of this period. There's a great collection of these at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, if you ever want to check them out. So navigation, celestial navigation, all of this is traceable to this period. And so something happened. And what happened, as was previously described, I was told, and forgive me for repeating from what you might have heard, 12th century kicks in, and then you get the influence of this scholar, Al-Ghazali. All right? And so out of his work, you get the philosophy that mathematics is the work of the devil.
Okay, that tradition you represent, Hamza Tzortzis. Superstitious buffoons who ended the Islamic golden era. That is your tradition, Hamza Tzortzis. Blind cultists who ended the Islamic golden era.
As scholars worked tirelessly to translate every available scientific text, the Abbasids, without even realizing it, had successfully globalized knowledge. Eventually, this massive undertaking would become known as the translation movement, and it established Arabic as a scientific language of antiquity. As the movement gained momentum, the Abbasid Empire, which was already known as a military, economic, and cultural powerhouse, also became an intellectual haven. To that end, ambitious scholars who sought peace and stability for their research immigrated to the Islamic world. Some of the great minds of this era include Al-Khwarizmi, who combined the works of Greek and Indian scholars and made enormous contributions to the algebraic method, and Ibn Hayyan, who made his renowned accomplishments to alchemy and strongly influenced the course of European chemistry. Other important figures from this era include the Banu Musa brothers, who made mechanical devices and worked on the foundation of geometry. Women too surged in the sciences. Take Al-Fihri, Al-Astrolabi, Lubna of Cordoba, and Al-Mahanli, who all exceeded in mathematics. In any case, as the Abbasids came in contact with Greek philosophy, Indian numeral system, Persian rule of law, and other Chinese and Roman studies, the scholars became genuine students of Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Ptolemy, Brahmagupta, Sushruta, and others.
So, when the Muslim world was diverse and open, it was the intellectual center of the world. That was without fundamental Islam. Now let's go to your legacy, to Ibn Hanbal.
Most intellectuals submitted to the official Mu'tazila creed. However, a scholar named Ibn Hanbal from Baghdad refused to recognize the rationalist doctrine. He argued that the Quran was eternal and that it was not open for interpretation or innovation. Hence, the scholar and his followers rejected free will, metaphysics, rationalism, and subscribed to the literal interpretation of the Quran. Ibn Hanbal's theological view could not be more different than the Mu'tazilite scholars, who argued that the anthropomorphic verses in the Quran, which mention the hands, eyes, and face of God, indicate that the Holy Book should not be interpreted literally. Building on that, the Mu'tazilites stressed that the Quran was open to rational interpretation and innovation. In any case, for his defiance, Ibn Hanbal was imprisoned, tortured, and even banished from Baghdad. For over a decade, the Abbasid rulers tried to break the scholar, but in their pursuit, the caliphs had inadvertently made Ibn Hanbal a folk hero. Ibn Hanbal's defiance reduced the credibility of the Mu'tazila. As such, in the following decades, a backlash against Mu'tazilism spread across the Abbasid realm. And third, the end of the Inquisition facilitated the formation of more orthodox theological movements, many of which are still active. For instance, at the present, the Safa'ist school is predominant in East Africa and Southeast Asia, while the Maliki school holds an influence in Africa's Maghreb and Sahel region. Meanwhile, the Hanafi curricula prevails in the former Ottoman territories and Central Asia. As for the school of Ibn Hanbal, in the 18th century it experienced a reformation in the Wahhabi Salafi movement, and therefore its influence is limited but predominant in Saudi Arabia.
Now, you, Hamza Tzortzis, an Orthodox Muslim, you try to dress your blind surrender to Islam, a cult named surrender, Islam means surrender, with a veil of intellectualism and reason. With your sophistry, presuppositional apologetics, and pseudo-scientific and philosophical literacy, you are just a gateway to deceive people to enter a world where reason and free thinking is obsolete. You are part of the problem.
Innate disposition, has a ruh, a soul, has a qalb, a heart, has a aql, and the intellect is a function of the heart in Islamic tradition, and it has a fitrah, and the fitrah is clouded. And within the fitrah, the innate disposition, there are forms of proto-knowledge in the Islamic tradition that God is a reality and that He's worthy of worship, but that clouded. So it could be that a sound, rational argument, philosophical argument, whatever, can uncloud your innate disposition to awaken the truth within, or it could be something else, or it could be a combination of things. So when you ask me, it needs to be demonstrated, well, I need to find out who you are, because I don't know where your cloud is. Maybe you need a rational argument. Maybe you need a good hug. Maybe you need some love. Maybe you need some really strong Quranic verses to wake you up, because the reason for your disbelief is arrogance, right?
That is the definition of blind faith. So, the professor in your debate, Hamza Tzortzis, was right after all. In one case, you reject science completely. No science can even investigate the Quran. Okay, so science cannot investigate the Quran. And then on the other hand, even a hug is enough to accept Islam, because as we all know, the reason we disbelieve is arrogance. In other words, you have as a given the Quran is true, and nothing can shake. And evidence is irrelevant. A hug, maybe you read something, maybe a kiss. It doesn't matter as long as you reach to the conclusion that Islam is true. This is what you just said, Hamza Tzortzis. And of course, that is a direct admission that you follow blind faith. Exactly as the professor in your debate was claiming. You just admitted that with black and white words. Now, to end this video, let's see the soulmate of Hamza Tzortzis, Ahmad Subboor, how he changes the definition of what is a fact to always meet his presuppositions. Islam is a fact, in other words, by definition. And everything that goes against Islam is not a fact by definition. Let's see.
So in the beginning of my video, I said this is the way I am defining a fact for the purposes of this discussion. And
what is that definition?
Yeah. And that's the definition I used. Which I said was something absolute, something that's not going to change, and something that can't be revised.
So, according to Subboor, when it comes to evolution, a fact is something absolute, something that is not going to change, and something that cannot be revised. This is what he defines as fact in his paper when it comes to evolution. Now let's see what is a fact when it comes to prophecies in the Quran.
Now, what's the criteria to test whether something is or is not a genuine prophecy? I want to ask you that. How would you discern the truth from falsehood?
You'd use empirical evidence.
Exactly, you would use empirical evidence. Something verifiable, something falsifiable, and something precise.
3 again. Sorry. 3 again. Something verifiable, something falsifiable, and something precise. It's not the other 3. So when it comes to prophecy in the Quran, suddenly a fact, evidence, became something verifiable, something falsifiable, and something precise. It cannot go any more obvious than this. Subboor, Ahmad, Hamza Tzortzis, and the rest of the Muslim of this gang, the rest of the Muslim apologists of this gang, and Islam obviously, are blind cultists. Now, the only question remaining is, Muslims, you follow blindly blind cultists? Thank you very much.